Greetings, and thank you for joining us on Cybersecurity Today. I'm your host, Jim Wiggins. If this is your first time tuning in, let me offer a quick overview of our show. Our show explores the intricacies of cybersecurity. Drawing on my background in the industry, we're going to present detailed and fascinating conversations about the challenges of computer security. This 30-minute program is structured similarly to a talk show or newscast focusing on a wide range of topics, issues, and the most recent advances in the cybersecurity industry. It's designed to be accessible to everyone, from those new to cybersecurity to the most experienced professionals, with the goal of offering key insights and viewpoints from top cyber experts on current trends in the cybersecurity field. We aim to attract a diverse audience, from novices all the way to seasoned experts. And we hope that you find today's episode both enlightening and entertaining. Typically, our program is broken into two distinct segments. The first segment we call Cyber Bites. This centers on an assortment of current topics and trends that are actively occurring today in the cybersecurity industry. Then, in our second segment, we're excited to have Mr. Brian Correia, the Director of Business Development at SANS-GIAC, join us. He will share crucial insights from the 2024 SANS-GIAC Report, focusing on the vital aspects of hiring, training, and retaining mid-level cybersecurity professionals. This discussion promises to illuminate strategies for enhancing the cybersecurity workforce's capabilities and effectiveness. Now, let's go ahead and dive into the Cyber Bite segment and explore the latest news in the cybersecurity field. In a coordinated international operation, the FBI and global law enforcement partners have taken down a dark web site operated by Lockbit, the world's leading ransomware gang, significantly disrupting their operations. The crackdown has resulted in the development of decryption software for victims, the arrest of 2 operatives, and the indictment and sanctioning of 2 Russian men associated with the gang. This action represents a crucial blow to the ransomware ecosystem, which has extorted over $1.1 billion from organizations worldwide in the past year alone. As we wrap up our exploration of today's pressing cybersecurity headlines, we're going to shift gears. We've covered some of the most critical cyber threats facing our industry, and now it's time to dive deeper into solutions and insights that can make a difference. Joining us next is Mr. Brian Correia, Director of Business Development at SANS-GIAC, who brings a wealth of knowledge on developing the cybersecurity workforce. Stay tuned as we uncover the key findings from the 2024 SANS-GIAC Report and discuss how we can enhance the capabilities of cybersecurity professionals across the industry. We'll see you after a short break.
VA's round-the-clock hotline can put veterans who are homeless in touch with the resources and support they earned through their military service. Call 877-424-3838.
Welcome back to Cybersecurity Today. We're now joined by Mr. Brian Correia, Director of Business Development at SANS-GIAC, a distinguished figure in the cybersecurity realm with a rich background in enhancing cybersecurity certification and workforce development. Brian has played a pivotal role at SANS, SANS-GIAC, and previously at ISC2, where he focused on enterprise business development activities, events, member advocacy, and where he's also made a significant contribution to the cybersecurity community. His expertise spans across strategic partnerships, leveraging industry frameworks, and developing certification programs aimed at validating workforce skills for Fortune 500 companies and government agencies. Today, he's here to shed light on the 2024 SANS-GIAC Report, emphasizing the critical role of certifications in cybersecurity talent development and workforce validation. Brian, welcome back to the show.
Oh, well, thank you for having me. And thank you. That was very kind of what you said about me.
Awesome. Well, we're so glad to have you back. I think you're a three-peater now. This is your third time on the show.
It's like SNL. Do I get something after 5?
Yeah, exactly. So we'll have to have you back a couple of other times.
Do I get my own robe and
exactly.
stuff?
And rather than be a green jacket, maybe it'll be like a purple jacket.
Oh, even better.
There we go. There we go. All right, so I thought maybe we could talk a little bit about the brief, the report itself, and
Sure.
some of the objectives and some of the key areas that it focuses on relative to hiring. Can you talk at maybe a 10,000-foot view of what the report's all about?
So at a high level, it was done because there's so many reports out there that talk about the headcount gap problem. And we really wanted to focus beyond on the next steps. In other words, let's talk about a little bit of solutions. So what we wanted to focus on was mid-level careers. And the reason we did that is, while there's a lot of focus on entry level, and it's very, very important, if you look at the jobs that are actually available, 80% of them are actually mid-level career. And so part of the study was also talking about how that affects people on an entry level, but we wanted to focus on the mid-level careers, but we wanted to focus on 2 things, the skills and the expectations gap. And what we did is we focused on 5 work roles that were developed, so they were the top 5 work roles within CyberSeek. And so the idea was 5 roles that were completely different of each other. The reason why we picked 5 was because we knew it was going to be impossible to pick every role that was out there. But we also wanted to show in cybersecurity that this industry is very vast, right? What a ISSM, which is an information security system manager, versus a architect versus a vulnerability assessor is completely different from each other, from very technical to very managerial. So we wanted to kind of hone in and let people know that are not from this industry that we cover anything from legal to something that's extremely technical. And so hopefully I probably gave you more like a 5,000-foot view on that one, but the main goal was the skills and the expectations gap within cybersecurity.
So let's try to unpack a little bit about that.
Okay.
You talked about CyberSeek. I'd like you to maybe just elaborate on what that is for our viewers.
Yeah, sure.
And then you mentioned the 5 specific roles. One of the areas I wanted to talk to you about was the integration with NICE, the national, what we used to call the National Initiative for Cybersecurity Education, which is, as of this last year, no longer considered that, is now just called NICE.
NICE, yep.
But though I think those 5 roles come out of it. So can you talk to those 2 first points in terms of the CyberSeek, and then how those 5 roles, what NICE is all about, and how that kind of provides a broader context?
Yeah, so CyberSeek is a program that was put together partly through NICE. There was a couple other partners that were involved in it. But CyberSeek actually talks about job openings that are out there, and it divvies it up based on locations, it divvies it up based on roles, and that's all based on the NICE framework. And so some ways, the best way of explaining the NICE framework is it's the standardization of work roles within cybersecurity that's been put together by the United States government. It's no different than what they've done like 100 years ago with doctors and lawyers. They're now bringing it over to cybersecurity. And so one thing I think that really popped out of the study is that even today, cybersecurity has grown so fast, there's really not been a good standardization. Now, part of the problem is it's not that NICE hasn't done it, is that people don't know about NICE well enough yet to start incorporating. But when you read about problems that are out there, one of the biggest things, actually it came up as number 1 and number 2. So we had 2 audiences. The one audience was people that head up security teams that do the hiring, retainment. They could be from very technical, they could be like threat analysts, they could be a whole bunch of different things. And the second audience was HR managers. So people that are hiring, not just for cybersecurity, but across the board. But with HR managers, it was literally like the top thing that came up. And then even with the people that head up security teams, it also was just like crazy high of, hey, if there's one thing we could fix is standardization of work roles.
And so NICE has what, like 50 or so plus work roles, I think, in it? And you're talking about 5 of probably the most prevalent or the most common work roles that you identified within the study. Is that a fair way to characterize it?
Try to do. So for example, the NICE framework has multiple roles in forensics. So we took the top role with that. It had multiple roles in management. We took the top role within that. So what we tried to do was take what they had and literally take what was considered the top 5. But some of that could be rolled into each other. Those roles do change a little bit, but forensics is definitely its own specialty, if that makes sense. And so we really try to focus it from that standpoint.
When I read the report, one of the things that stood out was it seemed like there's a lot of companies out there that either aren't aware of or aren't currently utilizing the NICE framework. I thought that was an interesting data point. Can you speak to that for a minute?
Yeah, I'll be quite frank, that actually surprised us a little bit. So much that we even had internal talks and said, hey, should we use that data or not use that data? And we felt it was really important because the data also backed up that people really wanted to see standardization across the board. And so part of the idea of all of this is that we have solutions. So we've also built in case studies. So we have case studies by people from Amazon, Microsoft, Leidos, CISA, which is within the government, MasterCard. And we also have somebody from Black Rainbow Group, which is kind of like an intelligence community. So kind of think of like, Spook and stuff along those lines. But he was a lead for the Homeland Security investigations of DHS. But part of the idea was we wanted to provide solutions. NICE clearly is a good solution in the marketplace that we just don't think people are fully aware exist. If you read the study, it wasn't that people were happy, I think for the most part, with the NICE framework. It was more the concern that people didn't know about it.
Yeah, I saw something like, I think it identified only like 14% of organizations out there are using it, which seemed to me there was over 50% that just weren't, and 35 or so that didn't know about it. Let's talk for a moment about some of the findings relative to certifications and training. I mean, that's a nice segue moving off of NICE. How critical, based on the report, are certifications and specialized training in preparing mid-level managers? Can you speak to that for a minute?
Yeah, so one thing that actually did surprise me a little bit about the study was I always assumed that certifications, the more technical you were, the more that certifications matter. The more managerial you did, the less it did. The report actually came in the complete opposite. Now, if you look at the numbers, they were pretty close across the board. But as you became more managerial, the numbers went higher. As you became more technical, the numbers went a little bit lower. One thing that was interesting was certifications came in 2-to-1 as far as the importance of hiring. So I thought that was a very fascinating...
Versus 2-to-1 versus certification?
Versus like a degree, for example.
Interesting. Okay.
Yeah, so like a undergraduate, graduate, a PhD. And I believe that was just because certifications are more specialized, right? Not just with us, but with anybody in the marketplace. So when we did that study, that wasn't just exclusive of GIAC certifications. The whole goal was to cover the whole marketplace with that. But it was fascinating to be able to see from role to role to role what people really cared about.
Understood. Maybe building on top of that, can we talk about the balance between on the job versus the certification for skill development?
Yeah.
I know the report spoke to that a little bit. Can you maybe kind of summarize what the findings were there?
Yeah. So, it was fascinating. It especially comes out in the case studies, which is, hey, there's no silver bullet, right? On-the-job training is extremely important. And, what I thought was a fascinating one was Sharifa. So she gets all the credit from this. Sharifa from Amazon talked about how they have a cyber hospital. So think of it as almost like doctors and how they have apprenticeships, how they build those doctors up, how they have on-the-job training. And she talked about how they use that kind of analogy in cybersecurity and building up their staff. Because, one of the things that was very fascinating, I think, also about the study is the reason I talk about the expectations is one thing that people are always, or one thing that was very interesting is people want to hire these rock stars. They want somebody that has skills across the board. And the reality is people are becoming more specialized all the time. And so what we meant by the expectations gap was, hey, people that didn't quite exist, or there was only special unicorns, right? So one of the case studies was Jay from Microsoft. Once again, he gets all that credit for that. And Jay talked about, hey, there's only so many LeBrons in the world, right? There's only one LeBron. And so when you need to hire, one of the things I think you'll see consistently from the data and the case studies was you needed a combination of training, certification, but probably the most important was on-the-job training. But the goal was a lot of them said, look, you want to find the right individual, bring them in the door. Hopefully they walk in with maybe like 80% of what you're looking for. You need to get them the rest of the way. Like, don't expect that you're going to have somebody in the door 100%. So some of the concerns, and I've heard it elsewhere in the marketplace, is, hey, you bring somebody in who is the rock star. Part of the problem is they now walk in the door. Do they really have the skills you need? They come at a very hefty price, right? And the chances they may walk out the door to go somewhere else, right? So Jay talks about how there's so much competition for hiring these rock stars, yet there's really good people that you can skill up and you'll have much more success doing it that way.
So that leads me into the retention discussion, but I want to circle back for a moment and ask
Sure.
a little bit more about hiring. I know the report talks a little bit about salary competitiveness and career pathways.
Yep.
How did those play into the hiring of cyber talent that you were just discussing?
Yeah, so no surprise, salary came in number one, right, across the board. And I don't think anybody's going to be surprised to hear that, right? Salary competitiveness. And what we partly tried to do with the study is, hey, everybody knows that was going to be number one. But number two and number three isn't too far behind. And especially with people that headed up security teams, defining career paths was extremely important of how to retain folks. The whole idea of also in cybersecurity, hey, what a pen tester is today versus the future is going to be completely different. Austin from CISA very much talked about one of the areas that the government, but corporate is also lacking, is how do you take a technical person and make them into a managerial? Because there's a certain path that those people, not everybody, but there's a certain path that people want to follow that, right? And so how do you take a person that's always had a technical path, because they can be extremely successful because of what they know, and bring that over into a managerial standpoint? And so, there was very much of some ideas of solutions of how do you get that person from technical to managerial, which is a relatively big problem.
So I want to come back to that, but let's dig a little bit deeper into the retention aspect of it in the report.
Sure.
Any other, you mentioned salary, you mentioned career pathways. What other areas of retention were identified as most beneficial for, or the most effective within the context of the report?
Yeah, so I mean, you definitely saw some things about, benefits came up, work from home, things along the lines of flexibility always came up. You did see a lot as far as having opportunities for them to continue training, continue growing, that there was career paths for them, that they had a future and there was a clear path of what they could do for the future. Now, some of that may seem common sense, but a lot of times people are brought into a role, they walk in the door, and that's it for them, right?
Yeah.
And especially in cybersecurity. One thing, I know you haven't asked a question, but what was fascinating from CyberSeek was to know that 80% of those roles were mid-level career roles. because sometimes one of the biggest concerns is everybody hears about this headcount gap problem, right? There's a 2 million shortage, 2 billion, sometimes tomorrow it'll be 2 trillion. And people start coming into cybersecurity, they get in and they realize there's no roles for them. And they keep saying everybody that I keep talking to wants somebody that already has experience. How do I get experience if I don't have it? So part of the idea behind this was to talk about that a little bit and where the headcount gap problem is, with the idea of taking those 5 work roles and talking about what people are looking for, what they're seeking, and kind of going into that, right? That all ties into now this expectations gap, that people think that there's more people out there with those skills than necessarily exist. And you're finding what I would consider very mature organizations. Leidos is probably a good example, or Microsoft or Amazon, that have found ways to work around that, right?
Yeah.
And they're feeling that pain, and how are they successfully working around it, right?
So you're alluding to something that I did want to bring up. And in the report, they did differentiate for organizations between, do we not have enough people, headcount, or do they not have enough skill? Yeah. And there was a bar in there that was pretty powerful. And what was interesting is that it seemed like the skill gap was just edged out the headcount by just a little bit. Can you speak to that for a minute?
Yeah, I mean, I think that was a little bit of a surprise. One of the surprises out there is you always hear of, hey, we don't have enough staff. And if you looked at the survey, one thing that was a little bit interesting, you have to take it from the standpoint, these are managers in HR, but still they're the people that control the budgets. It was actually a very small number that felt that their headcount gap, that they were having problems. The larger the corporation, the larger the organization, the less that was a problem. The smaller it was, more it was. But it was more of, how do we get the skills of the staff up, was even higher than, yeah, I need to bring in more people. But it wasn't like people were saying the earth is falling, we don't have enough people. It was more of, we don't have enough of the skills is more of the problem.
Understood.
So I thought that was fascinating, because you do hear a lot, I think, in the media, if I'm fair to say, hey, there's not enough people out there and people can't bring in enough folks. And don't get me wrong, that is a problem. Like yesterday, I did hear like Cyber Command, for example, because they require people with clearances, has a problem finding the right folks to do that. But once again, it's finding the right folks and the skills, and knowing that they have to deal with clearances and stuff along those lines. So, I mean, I think hopefully this will have some solutions. This study's not perfect. It's the first one that SANS has done. But hopefully part of the idea is that we provide some solutions, but also we get the discussion started, right? Like ultimately, hopefully the study is just a piece to start the discussion more of, hey, there is a lot more to this than, it's great to go out and have a soundbite, but I like to think we're talking a little bit more than just soundbite.
Understood. You were talking about the skill gap challenge. Can we talk about what the report summarizes or recommends in terms of senior management and actions that they might take to help kind of close that skill gap challenge?
Yeah. So, one of the things that I think you'll see in the case studies is people were talking about how you may even take people that were not in cybersecurity. So MasterCard was a good example of that. People in MasterCard from departments you would have never thought were perfect for cybersecurity. And the idea is, taking those individuals. And it's funny because we had another study that said high school teachers were considered one of the best professions of hiring people from. I mean, because they can think outside the box. That's actually one of their biggest talents is, we don't give enough credit to our high school teachers of what they do. But what MasterCard was doing was they were finding the right people and bring them into cybersecurity. So I think you'll see a lot in the study talking about, hey, part of the solution And part of the problem isn't necessarily just to keep hiring, try to up the salaries. You're going to have to think outside the box of, things like cyber hospitals, of how do I take somebody and convert them over. But, also in turn, you may have a person, for example, in the case of MasterCard, where MasterCard now has taken an employee who may have left, right? And has now made them hugely successful in cybersecurity. But I think some of the big things out of the study were, look outside the box. Don't just hire the rock stars. I think it was very important to realize that this industry has a lot of roles. Those roles also have different, like we listed on there of different people of like what matters the most in that job. Like what are they looking for? Like as strange as it sounds, like forensics, cybersecurity fundamentals was very important. In other words, they felt if they brought in somebody with those fundamentals, they could get them up to doing the forensics piece. And so, those I think were some of the big things that came out of it. Diversity was a big one. I was pleasantly surprised, and it was great to see that a lot of organizations were doing a lot to try to increase diversity and really make this industry grow. What I also thought was fascinating was where they were coming from. I would have thought, things like some associations and stuff along those lines. Actually, number one, which does tie a little bit into entry level, they were coming in from universities and colleges.
Interesting.
And it was not by a little margin, it was by quite a bit.
Awesome. All right, Brian. Well, look, we are out of time. We want to appreciate you coming in.
Thank you
for coming
me.
in and sharing this information with our audience. We will make sure that we have a QR code available for downloading of the report.
Perfect.
Within the broadcast, so that if anybody wants to be able to take a look at it, read through it, and take advantage of any of the recommendations, they'll be able to do so. Thanks again for coming in.
Thank you for having me.
And that wraps up today's episode. We're grateful for Mr. Brian Correia for his participation and for sharing critical insights from the 2024 SANS-GIAC Report, highlighting the essential strategies in cybersecurity workforce development. We trust that you found today's discussion enlightening and thought-provoking, offering fresh perspectives on cybersecurity talent cultivation. For more information about cybersecurity today and to keep up on upcoming episodes, please visit our show's website at www.cybersecuritytoday.org. Don't forget that you can also access our website directly by scanning the QR code that's displayed at the bottom of your screen. Additionally, we invite your questions or comments through email. Don't hesitate to get in touch with us at our email address, which is contact@cybersecuritytoday.org. We look forward to seeing you at our next broadcast. Thanks a lot for joining us. Have a great day. Stay safe and stay informed.